The following interview is part of the Price of Freedom Oral History Series, sponsored by the Madison County Military Heritage Commission, and informed the public of the sacrifices made by veterans in our community on battlefields around the world. Each veteran interviewed received a Valor Award for their heroism during combat and is a member of the Military Heritage Hall of Heroes. We wish to thank the Huntsville School System and the ETV Broadcast Center for their help in presenting this Military Heritage program. Hello everyone, I'm Tom Kennemer. Today we'll be talking with U.S. Army veteran Emil Posey. Emil retired as a lieutenant colonel after serving 24 years in the military. He is the recipient of the Silver Star Medal for his heroic action in 1969 while serving in Vietnam. Emil was inducted into the Madison County Military Heritage Hall of Heroes in 2021. Emil, it's a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's an honor.
Appreciate it. First of all, I know you're an Alabama native, but grew up in Maryland, is that right?
Yes. My family moved up to Bethesda, Maryland when I was about 4 years old. So I have very sketchy memories of that prior time here in Alabama.
What part of Alabama were you?
In Haleyville, over in Winston County.
Okay.
Born there, and then I came back here when I transferred here with NASA back in 80, right at the end of 86.
Okay.
I've been here ever since, and this is where I'm going to be forevermore.
So you came back to Alabama?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, what spurred your interest in the military, and why did you choose the Army? Excuse me.
Well, I've always been an avid reader, and when I got into junior high school, I really got into military history. General military history, but particularly U.S. military history, and even then with World War II. That became a real area of interest to me. And as I was going on through high school, I wasn't sure if I was going to be going to college or not, and the military looked like a real possibility to me. And as I was in my senior year, this was in 1966 in high school, still I wasn't really ready for college, and I think my mother kind of picked up on that, and she suggested that I enlist, which was kind of interesting since Vietnam was at the height, but hey, I understood where she was coming from.
Did you have other family members in the military?
My older brother, had been in the Marine Corps about 8-10 years prior to me.
Semper Fi.
Yes, Semper Fi, yes. And that's the only one at the time.
Right,
yes.
okay, I see, yeah.
So anyway, in fact, when I went to look into enlisting, I first went to a Marine Corps recruiter. Okay. But I tell you, we sat down, and he was in his dress blue uniform, that stiff collar, and very erect, and he just kind of looked down at me with his scowl on his face, and I looked at him in the middle, and he said, "Nope, this is not for me." So I
didn't take long to make up your mind.
Yes, it didn't take long. So I went to the Army, and because that what I really wanted to do. I had a very narrow focus of ambition. I wanted to be a paratrooper.
I see.
And there you are.
Yeah. And you kept telling the recruiter, I understand, I want to be a paratrooper.
Yes.
I want to be a paratrooper.
Because of course, at the height of the Vietnam War, you had people being drafted and so forth. They wanted to get their recruiting, the volunteers up. And so, what school did I want? What field did I want to get into? I kept telling him, I want to be a paratrooper. I want to be a paratrooper. He said, okay. And I, looking back on it, what you're really saying is I'm going to be a Spec 4 assistant machine gunner in Vietnam, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to jump from planes.
So where did you go to boot camp, and how was boot camp? Was it quite interesting? I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay. And
basic training was really interesting because you'd grown up, in a family environment. School, I spent the whole my schooling was all right in there in Bethesda, Maryland, and of course you meet different people as you're growing up and so forth. But you're all in that same milieu, if you will.
Right.
You get into a basic training, and all of a sudden you're coming across people from all across the country, all walks of life, all shapes and sizes and predilections and so forth, and that was an education itself, learning how to deal with people and different people, and plus it was a whole new environment. And this may sound kind of strange, but I had no girlfriend at home. I had no real ties at home. Right. This was my first step into my future, wherever that was going, and that was kind of cool. So I just rolled with it and made the best of it as I could.
Now, after the testing that they normally do while you're in boot camp and so forth, they felt that you were officer material. Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, before I actually enlisted, had to go up to Fort Holabird, Maryland,
Okay.
which I guess is an induction center, or was.
Right.
Fort Holabird is closed now, but back then, among other things, it was an induction and a testing center. And I went in there and took my test. I was 17 at this point, and apparently I did pretty well. I was the third one called up, and they said, well, we don't see any school here. You know, what did you want to get into? Well, I want to be a paratrooper. Okay, it's a different guy. He said, well, look, your scores are pretty good. You go back, pick out any school you want, and we're going to send you to OCS. Oh. Well, that sounds
You're
pretty
17
good.
or 18 years old at that time.
17 at that
17.
point.
Wow.
Yeah, almost 18, but 17.
Yeah.
And so it was a few more months before I actually enlisted. It was February of '68, so I was 18 at this point. But you're right, in basic training, I had to take more tests, and that was the acceptance. If I had not passed that test, or whatever the case, I wouldn't have gone. So that was the second test. So the promise, the commitment that I was going to go to OCS back in the induction center, that was more really saying you'll get another shot at a test.
Right.
So.
Okay. And then when you did get to choose your field, you chose, I want to be a paratrooper, right? Is that what basically you
Well,
told?
that's where I was headed.
Right.
I actually had picked armor.
I
I
see.
also
Okay.
was fascinated by tanks, and I couldn't tell you this day why I wasn't selected for armor OCS. But I was in an infantry path, and so I wound up going to Fort Benning, Georgia. Got there in July of '68. And so at this point, I was still 18, and infantry OCS, 6 months, and there you are.
All right, tell us about the officer training. How different, Emil, is it from your basic boot camp?
The boot camp, I think the biggest thing about the boot camp was getting used to this whole new environment and being regimented, and everything you did, there was a time for it and so forth. OCS was much the same. You'd gotten acclimated to the military a little bit. Okay, I was still young, very, very pliable, so to speak. Right. But the stress, the regimentation was all taken up a level or two.
Another notch or two.
Yes, absolutely. And so we had schedules that we would come down to minutes, and I literally remember sometimes getting in that first formation, I've got 30 seconds. I could do this, I could straighten this seam, and then I can make it. Right. Literally down to seconds. So the stress level, the intensity, and of course there was mandatory studying in the evenings, and they're all the time. They're they were trying to mold you. In OCS, they were trying to kind of break you down a bit and mold you more. So it was all of that accomplished. One of the things I knew I needed was to give me discipline and self-confidence. Basic did that. My advanced infantry training between basic and OCS did that. OCS in spades. So.
And you were busy after officer training. You went straight to jump school. Is that correct?
Right.
And what was it like the first time you jumped out of? Well, normally I guess we'd say what you thought was a perfectly good aircraft.
Well, I've been told that before. A lot of people will say that, and I always respond that after all my time in the military, I don't know that I was ever in a perfectly good airplane.
Right.
Actually, the jump school was again, it was different. You're on this big adventure, see, and it was really exciting. The jump school was 3 weeks. The first week is the ground week. You learn some of the basics and the parachute, but a lot of it is really physical conditioning and getting your mind set and what they expect of you. The second week was tower week, and you actually had 2 towers you had to go out of. The first was the 34-foot tower. You're in a harness, static lines, but you're really linked up to a cable system, and it's to get you used to exiting the aircraft, making sure you have the right body position. What do you do? And you feel that jerk, which is like the chute opening, and you check it and then on down to the recovery. Towards the end of the week was the 250-foot tower, where they actually take you up in a parachute, 250 feet, and drop you. And so now you are coming down in a parachute, practicing your landing. Third week, 5 jumps. In my case, I jumped out of a C-119, the flying boxcar.
Right, I remember those,
That's the only time I've been in a C-119, was then. But that was 5 jumps. And my first jump, very first one, I was in the door waiting. Okay, in other words, you jump commands, you stand up, you shuffle the door. Well, someone is first in line while you wait till you get the green light and the tap, on the rear to exit. Well, I was at first in line. So I was 19 at this point, and standing. I had only been in an aircraft in flight 2 other times. That's both in the military, going across the country of training and back. And so there you are, 1,250 feet, which was the typical jump altitude for training jumps. Just standing there, looking out, and thinking, in a minute, I'm stepping out into this. And actually, it was exhilarating.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember kind of the tap. There's so much noise, you can't really hear the go. You felt the tap. And the next thing I knew, I was under the chute, spreading the risers, checking to make sure that it opened properly. I mean, the training was so intense. Boom, there it was. You know?
So it wasn't, it was a tap, wasn't a boot in the behind or anything?
No, although I'm sure they would have if that's what it took, yeah.
Now how long does this usually take, say 1,200 feet, you know, to get down to the ground? What, is this like a matter of seconds or?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. I would say 30-ish seconds.
Really? Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure. You come down when you land with the chute is functioning properly as they usually do, of course. Is equivalent to about jumping off a 6 or 8 foot wall.
Wow.
And I wouldn't want to do that today.
Right.
You know, I'd crater. But you know, back when you're in condition and you learn the proper fall, you know, the landing technique and so forth.
Yeah.
In fact, I was never through all the time I was in the airborne and jumping, I was never concerned about the chute opening.
Yeah.
I always just accepted that, you know. And yeah, there's always room possibility, but my concern was always, am I going to land properly?
Right.
My concern was what I was going to do.
Yeah. Break a leg or something like that.
Or twist an ankle or what have you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, it didn't take long for you to wind up in Vietnam, right? I mean, after jump school?
No. From OCS, we got our assignments, and there were about 6 lieutenants, new lieutenants in my OCS company. They got picked up based on our request, as far as I know, because I had requested Special Forces. You could fill out a dream sheet. But 6 of us were tagged to go to SF, and of course, before I reported into Fort Bragg, I had to loop through jump school. But went straight up to Fort Bragg, got there in March or so of 68, and in December of 68, after I'd gone through Special Forces training and so forth, and in fact had gone through en route to Vietnam in the fall into December, got into a Vietnamese language school at Fort Bliss, Texas. But in December 22nd, 1968, I touched down at Tan Son Nhut, and there you were. So it was less than a year. You know, a bit less than a year after I'd been commissioned.
You had mentioned earlier to me about your flight in and seeing the crater. Explain that.
Well, we went over on, there were Army charter flights,
right?
And, you know, 727s or equivalents. Interesting, I think they fed us about every 3 or 4 hours. I think it was just a way to keep us, you know, calm and have it. Yes, so got a lot of eating on the flight. But as you're coming in, and you're coming in on your phone, and you're coming down, and you could look out the window and you could see where B-52 strikes had been and other, and I assume there were airstrikes from the sides of the crater. So you knew you were coming into a war zone. That was the first one. So we hadn't even landed yet, and said, here we are. You know.
Well, and that was kind of your first impression.
Another impression, which was the same thing as showing you're in a war zone. We landed at Tan Son Nhut, and immediately went to, they bused us over to Long Binh for the replacement battalion there, which handles the new assignments and so forth. And when they put us on the bus, I noted this wire mesh, heavy wire mesh on all the windows, outside the windows and on the back of the bus. And that was to keep people, you know, bad guys out there throwing grenades or other kind of bombs, trying to just punch them through the window and get them into the bus. And I remember even then, and of course I'm 20 years old by now, you know, coming into Vietnam. Even then I thought this may be the least poor choice, but all they have to do, and what I would have, based on my training, I said, you just wrap something on there that'll hook onto the mesh, and now it may not be coming in, but it's going to be right there hanging on the window. Right. It's not necessarily going to bounce off. But it was that kind of impression. I don't want to be overly critical, but the point is, you're already thinking, boy, look at this. This is, you know, this is getting real.
Yeah, this war zone, yeah. I mean, the idea was good, you know, but you have a point, you know, where it could stick or something like that.
Well, and also, I mean, it was new, so I'm immediately assessing things, and that's just what bubbled up at that point.
Sure.
The Vietnamese people overall and the country, when you look through the war-tornness, if you will, Vietnamese people were wonderful people and vibrant people, and the country was beautiful. And the people, they are a complex society. There's all kinds of different ethnic groups just in South Vietnam, and of course the history is very long and very complex. It's a great place. It was too bad they were in the center of this huge war going on.
Yeah. Emil, did you go straight into combat?
Pretty much. You had a little bit of processing to work your way through, but and actually I got there on December 22nd. By the end of January, I guess, so say within 30 days, I had made my way through the replacement center up to Nha Trang with Special Forces, a little combat orientation course they give there for a week, which I think as much as anything else was kind of let you finish your acclimatization to the heat and to the climate. And then was assigned out to an A-team, a Special Forces A-team, that was down north, a little west of north of Tay Ninh City, out on the Cambodian border.
Yeah.
So in about a month, yes.
What were the living conditions like when you were first? You didn't live in barracks, did you? All tents or?
Now you're talking about at the A camp?
Right.
The A camp was, it had been kind of bulldozed out as a camp. It was in the shape of a star. We had 5, what they called CIDG. They weren't Vietnamese Army. They were hired, civilians, the Civilian Irregular Defense Group, CIDG.
Right.
Had 5 companies. One was in each point of the star, some others inside and so forth. The camp officially was under the control of a Vietnamese Special Forces team, kind of our counterparts. We were there as advisors. But since it had been bulldozed out, there were no formal facilities. What we were in were basically sandbagged. If you had Connex containers, you get in, you could do some lumber inside to build up rooms and so forth. But it was not a very finished facility, but it was quite adequate for the needs.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And then metal bunks, just like you'd find in a barracks, and so forth.
Pretty good chow?
Well, the interesting thing with SF is that most of your regular military services, they get ration draws sent to them. And we had to buy our rations.
Really?
In my camp, A322, was at a place called Khartoum. Now that's not Kontum, that was further up north. This was Khartoum. It was a Cambodian-derived name for the little area. There was nothing there other than, in effect, a little kind of a crossroads. I don't even know how it got its name. There were no friendlies in our area, no civilians in our area. It was us and whoever was outside trying to do whatever they were trying to do. So what we wound up doing is we would send people back regularly, back to B team, which was in Tay Ninh City, and so forth, and they would beg, borrow, steal, scrounge, rations and send them out to us. There wasn't much to buy off the economy because there was no local economy. The second camp I was at, a place called Ben Soy, and that was A321, that was co-located at Ben Soy, which was a village and on a river, and so we could actually go out and buy rations from those folks, and also our usual scrounging. Yeah. But we didn't do too bad. There was an occasional week or so where you get a little tired of that rehydrated macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
But other than that, not bad.
Now, as you mentioned, Emil, you were in Army Special Forces. Tell our audience the difference between the Army's elite forces, Green Berets, the Rangers, and so forth.
Well, these days, you can use the term elite quite a bit more than you might necessarily do back then, although that's a relative thing. The elite status of it really is the quality of your training and what you would go through. And you get that kind of intensive training because of the missions that you were given. Rangers, there were no Ranger units at the time I joined the military. Rangers were individual qualification, which was very prestigious, because you went through a rigorous training to get it. And it was only towards, I want to say in 1969, that we actually saw the formation of some Ranger companies in Vietnam and a couple back stateside. SF had grown up back in the early 60s. You actually can trace its roots back to OSS days, the Office of Strategic Services back in World War II. But to actually get the beret and become the Green Berets, we're talking early 60s. And we were actual TO&E units. And the difference between us and Rangers as they came to be, where we were oriented towards linking up with indigenous groups to train and guide them. ironically, the primary mission was to conduct an insurgency. Now, this is back in the 60s. It may be a little bit different today.
Right, right.
It's hard to believe that the 60s is so far back in history, but lots of things changed. Well, we would go in, but the primary mission was actually to conduct an insurgency. What we were doing in Vietnam was assisting a counterinsurgency. The Rangers were, and so we were like force multipliers in a sense. We go in and we train, advise, assist, you know, and perform. Now, we could also do direct action missions and what have you, called upon, but the main thing was the linking up and the training and guiding and assisting irregulars. The Rangers were designed with many of the same skills, but for more direct application, direct missions in support of strategic goals, but also in support of conventional forces directly. But they were very well trained, very well organized for it. And then, of course, you had the SEALs back then. Now, they were Navy. They were, I would say my impression was almost a cross between the Special Forces and the Rangers. They would go in and advise, but they also did a lot of direct action themselves. Very highly qualified folks. The Airborne has always been kind of a cut above, as I think you can say about the Marine Corps. There's a strong motivation factor in there that really plays into that esprit de corps. And today, I think you can take with a lot of our conventional forces, you could put it in elite status because they are so well trained and so well motivated. So these days, it almost comes down to what are you employing them for? What is their mission? Back in the 60s, it was that, as it translated into that degree of training and motivation that you were given. So,
going back to your training, how much longer did it take to go through like Special Forces school or training?
Well, it depended on your MOS. For officers, we had a 3-month course. It was called the Special Forces Officer Qualification Course. Now, again, I'm going to say this is back in 1968.
Right, thanks.
I don't know what it is today. But depending upon your MOS, you would have your qualification course would be focusing on different things, of course, would be different lengths of time. The SF Medic, if I recall correctly, that was almost a year worth of training to become a qualified SF Medic. Those guys could do minor surgery in the field.
Wow.
Yeah. But the other you had operations and intelligence, you had light infantry and heavy infantry, you had engineering, which is a demo, and you had communications. And every A team was represented there with those 5 disciplines among the NCOs, among the team members, with an awful lot of cross-training afterwards too. You know, so that was one of the hallmarks. You could operate individually, break up into smaller teams, you know, sub-teams, if you will, or you operate as an A team, what have you. So.
Whatever type of elite force you were involved with, you were physically trained. You were in good shape.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How many miles do you run today? I mean, it just probably...
Back then, well, you know, running was never my thing, I'm going to have to admit.
Yeah, mine
you know, my best time in boots was just under 7 minutes in the mile.
Right.
Okay. It was as much endurance as anything else. But I will tell you, the training and what I found with SF was it was as much here as it was here. And the reason I say that is I always had this, I was never some young warrior, you know. I was just a regular guy coming off the street and having to, you know, work my way through. But I had this idea that if I had to go do something, if we were in training to go scale a mountain, well, if you can do it and he can do it, I can do it too.
Set your mind to it.
Yeah. So it's really, it's that kind of determination and perseverance. That's what is worth more, because you can always do more physically than you think you can. You always do that. But I will say, as I sit and watch movies today and in the news, and I'm thinking, there's no way I could do that today. In fact, I watch some of the stuff gets done, and I even wonder, how did I do that back then? But you do.
Emil, tell us about the battle or combat action, excuse me, that led you to receiving the Silver Star.
It was basically a standard combat operation. We had AOs, areas of operation, for each camp. And, you know, I've been thinking, coming to this interview, I'm not sure just what the size of the AO was. I'm going to say roughly it could have been 100 square miles.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's 10 miles by 10 miles. And that may actually be a little understatement. And they had the A camps out on the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese border, kind of, the others are looking for infiltration, you know, coming in. Well, we had no friendlies in our area, so we had every week or so, every week, 10 days, send an operation to a sweep in part of the AO. And typically it would be the better part of one of the indigenous companies, 2 or 3 of the Vietnamese Special Forces, and 2 or 3 of the U.S. Special Forces. So you would rotate through these pretty often, you know.
Right,
so
yeah.
Every couple months you were going out. This one, I couldn't tell you why we were going into the particular area we were going. I just don't recall. You know, we always had a reason.
Right.
But, you know, headed out, and this one happened to be a hellborn insertion, which was kind of fun, you know, get in.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got off the helicopter, started moving into the wood line, we started drawing fire, and it kind of picked up from there. What it turned out is that we had stumbled on, and I used that because I don't recall that we had actually expected, in particular, a base camp there, but it was a base camp. And
Is it North Vietnamese or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
NVA. And if I can sidebar for a minute, one of the things that Khartoum A322 was known for was we got mortared all the time. You know, it was nothing to get 100 and 150 rounds incoming in an evening, not every single evening, but with regularity.
Yeah.
And what I figured at the time is we were probably some mortar school. And we were the graduation exercise, so the live fire. We got it all the time. So what we did is we stumbled into this base camp that had mortars in it and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's funny how things work out. We were firing. My job is to try to advise the Vietnamese, get them moving, and hey, we got to get in there and do this and do that. You know, real gung-ho kind of stuff. One of the interpreters comes up and said, "We've captured an 82 millimeter mortar." Well, that's good. And so in my next report in, I reported that in. They said, well, send it in. Okay, so I turned to them and said, well, let's go get it and bring it here. They said, well, it's right over there. So you know that bamboo where that bunker is? Yeah. It's in there. we didn't actually have it yet.
Didn't capture it.
We knew where it was.
Right.
And it wasn't firing. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
but I guess who was the crew? So I got a little miffed, to be honest with you. And so I said, well, I'm not calling back and saying, oh, excuse me, I made a mistake. Yeah. You know, 20-year-old young lieutenant, no, I'm not doing that. Yeah. I went after that sucker. And that's what I did. I, you know, got up to the bunker, you know, made my way up there and
how far was it from where you originally started?
I don't know, maybe, but from where they were pointing it out, 10 meters, 15 meters, yeah. We were pretty close to it. Yeah. But throwing a couple hand grenades, you know, and it was blowing off some of the overhead cover front for the hand grenades crawled in. There were 2 NVA that were dead, and there was the tube. So I threw the tube out, you know, made sure that the guys were dead. I went through their pocket, see if there's anything in there, and there was just, you know, just personal stuff in their pocket. You're always looking for intel. But threw the mortar tube out, and we sent it back in. And luckily, it was a good one in the sense that one of the grenades had gone off right next to the barrel, and so the barrel was actually pushed in, and you had all the pock marking from the fragments of the grenade. So they knew that we hadn't simply bought this somewhere, you know, as war surplus and claiming we got it. No, this was real. And so that's really what it was. And then we were out for a total of 5 days, 4 nights, something like that. Mm-hmm. We never did get all into that bunker complex that day. We came back the next day, and while we had resistance the first day, the next day it was deserted. They'd gone, because we were right on the border. When I say on the border, I mean 500 meters from the Cambodian border. I mean, it was right there. Well, they just drift back across the border.
Right. When you got back to base camp, did someone recommend you for the Silver Star? How did that turn out?
One of my NCOs that was on the operation.
Saw the whole thing.
Yeah. He was, in fact, our senior medic.
I see. Yeah. Emil, how do you handle the stress of combat? What's going through your mind when you know the enemy is shooting at you? Talk about that.
Well, that's kind of interesting because everybody is going to handle it differently.
Right.
I would, even before you got on operation, you always knew there was that possibility. You know, what's going to happen this time? You could get some butterflies in the stomach and worry about it a little bit, but that just kind of prompted you to make sure you're planning better and make sure all your stuff is
your together. Toes,
yeah. When you're actually in the field of operation like that, you know, where things are happening, whether you're being shot at or you're, you know, whatever, I would never get scared per se. Your training would kick in. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that my first jump out of the aircraft in training. Yeah. See, I felt a tap on the button. The next thing I knew, I was out there. Right. That training just kicked right in. And that's what happened here. So it's your confidence level in yourself, your buddies, you know, your chain of command, all that stuff, your training, it kicks in. Afterwards, afterwards you could sit back and think and get some wobbly knees, like what might have happened, what could have happened.
Afterthought, yeah.
So I don't want to make it sound like I'm some kind of brave guy. It's just that's the way it manifested to me. Yeah. I knew people. I had one. He was an SF captain. He was a battlefield promotion from E6, and this guy he was the epitome of an SF officer. And he wound up in an operation with a mic force, which is a reaction force. I assume that was into hot areas. He got into a hole and didn't want to come out. Now, go figure. You know, I'd have never thought of that of him.
Right.
And maybe the next operation he got out, he would have snapped right back to it. That's the point. Everybody handles it differently, and you never know from action to action just what is going to go through your mind. Yeah. So you rely on your training and your confidence.
What it all comes back to. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's normal to be afraid or scared when in combat. That would be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you can, and not just in combat. I mean, there were times in training that I would get scared.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things we would scramble over all kinds of rock stuff. This is all in SF training, you know, rock climbing and so forth, and not tied in. And when you've got, you know, one fingertip of your left hand up here and one toe on this rock, little rock outcropping down here, and you're trying to figure out how do I move next. My heart was never in that. Okay, I could get scared at that stuff.
Yeah.
But again, you rely on your training, you rely on your team, and so it is always okay to get scared. In fact, I'm one of those to say that if you don't get scared, you got to wonder why. When I say that I didn't feel fear in combat itself, it's because things were happening so fast and your training was kicking in. I can't say I wasn't scared. It was just that fear was being overtaken by other stuff.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm articulating it correctly, but that's the way it came across. So yeah, you're going to get scared. It's okay to get scared. What you don't want to have happen is fear drives you to do something stupid or you're not accomplishing your mission. Right. Fear should be a factor, a tool, and you can either close it off or use it to your favor, and then press on.
Yeah. Was there anyone in your life that you feel especially helped prepare you to take the actions you did in combat? I mean, like a boot camp sergeant, or what?
I remember a lot of people. In fact, I remember my drill sergeant in basic training is Sergeant First Class Boxley, and he looked the epitome of this, drill sergeant. And his second was a sergeant, E5 Sergeant Strong. I can't say there's anyone. I would have to say it's more the collectively the training and so forth that built up. I can't point to any one particular individual that seemed to have that particular impact on me that drove me to do this or that. It was more just, this is the situation, this is what's called on me to do, my mission at the time, and you draw on all of your experience and your training and so forth.
But you often wonder, would you do it all over again if you?
Oh yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Might do some things differently, but we don't need to go there. But yeah, I would do it again, yes.
Well, now, when you had some free time, say after a mission, what could you do for relaxation? I mean, it's not a five-star hotel there, you didn't have a pool
depended
table
on where you were, of course. But like out at Khartoum, that's the camp I was at when I was in that particular action for which this award was rendered. There were no friendlies out there, so you had nowhere you could go. There was no sightseeing or anything. So you would, but you lived out there, so you had to take time off for yourself. Right. So it was reading. We had a television, a little black and white, and get out of the AFVN, the Armed Forces
Radio and Television Service.
Yeah, whatever that was, out of Saigon, and talking. Now, if you could get some time off to go back to the rear, to B team. Oh, even there, you really weren't doing any sightseeing, but there at least you had a bar you could go to,
right.
in the compound. It was an Army bar, and of course there was always the R&R, which is the 5-day stint. You got like one every 6 months, and that now you could do sightseeing and so forth. So I would have to say you had TV and so forth, but when you go back to the B team, I'd just say you'd carouse a little bit. You'd go drink with your buddies and tell stories, and then whatever.
Well, you didn't have cell phones either, so could you go back to a base camp or something and maybe talk, did the Red Cross provide a phone service or?
There were telephones. I never came across any that I could use, but I know they were out there.
Right.
My communication home was postal.
Okay.
And that was back in a time where you could write on the back of a top of a sea ration box. You could just take that and put who it's to and who you are, and the post office would mail it. It would get home.
It'd take care of you.
Occasionally I would. I think I made a little cassette tape. You know, I'd talk into it and send it home, but mostly it was just letters.
I'm sure you formed lasting friendships in the service. You still stay in contact with a lot of the people you served with?
Not many. Not from that far back. You know, tend to drift. Early on, after you got back stateside, whether still on active duty or even off, you can just think of a curve. You just had more people to deal with, and over time it kind of gets less and less. But there were a couple of exceptions. One was my commander, and this was a unit I was with Mac v. SOG. This was later. This was in my extending period. I wound up working with him in the U.S. Public Health Service back in Rockville.
Really? Okay.
Pure coincidence. We stumbled across, yes. And we were lasting friends. And they also came across a colonel who had been the head of Op 35, that directorate within Mac v. SOG that handled all the ground units that were doing Mac. Some people are going to recognize what I'm saying. It would take a bit to explain how all this works. But this Dan Shungle, and he was, in fact, both of them had been lifetime Special Forces officers. Dan Shungle had been at Lan Bay, for example. That's the first time that North Vietnamese armor was used against an SF camp. Okay. But he wound up at his last assignment before retiring. He was the post commander of Fort Ritchie, Maryland, which was a few miles north of Frederick, Maryland, which is where I was living at the time. And I was in the Army National Guard, which was SF unit that I found right after I got off of active duty. And we actually coordinated where we would go up and run exercises against his troops, try to test them. Right. So Colonel Shungle. So those are two examples. Yeah. But
how does it make you feel when people call you a hero, when they hear about or read about what you did in combat? How does that make you feel?
Well, I feel a bit of pride. You know, you kind of like it. I don't dwell on it because, and you hear this a lot from people, from folks who have been decorated. But it's true. You're just out there doing your job. Right. I got to tell you that you take most people, male, female, old, young, if they're in harm's way, they are capable of doing heroic things. Just the time and the place. And in my case, we're getting some recognition for it. Right. It is kind of fun, especially at this point, where I'm dealing with people that I've worked with for maybe 15 or 20 years, and they know I was in Vietnam, but that was so far back. Right. And then when something like this comes up, and they'll see a photograph of me back there, and it's like, wow, that's kind of fun. Yeah. But that's just reminiscing that they hadn't really seen that side of you. Yeah. But all in all, most people are heroic. They simply have to be put in a position where it's going to show.
Was there a period of adjustment for you, Emil, coming back from a war? A lot of combat veterans says it changes your life, your outlook on things.
It wasn't for me.
Really?
Now, I don't know what that says about me, but no, I've never had what I consider to be PTSD. You know, I just came back and just rolled on with life. You know, now when I came back from Vietnam, I remained on active duty for another year and a half, 2 years, whatever, before I got off. And then after I went off active duty, but went back to being a civilian, I immediately went into the Maryland Army National Guard, so I could still do a lot of the military stuff, you know, on the side, but had my civilian life as well. Yeah. So maybe some of that provided kind of a cushion. I don't know.
Have you ever been back to Vietnam since your war days? If you haven't, do you have the desire to do that?
I've kind of got the desire. I've not been back.
Right.
I've talked to a lot of folks that have gone back, and then they really recommend it. The closest I've done to going back is do a Google map and look at some of the stuff going on there and see some of the photographs. There's an organization here in town, you can get to them through the Veterans Museum, that organizes trips back. I'm just at this point in my life, you know, I'm not interested in going to the other side of the world, an 18-hour air trip and so on and so forth, and, you know, traipsing around. Although I do think once I got there, it'd be fun, you know. So.
A lot of changes since those days. Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
When I look at pictures now, and,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about just, it's now Ho Chi Minh City and not Saigon. No, I mean the built up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That culture has blossomed, which I go back to my mentioning about the Vietnamese being a beautiful people and a beautiful culture. They are productive. They are dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, it's fascinating.
Now, you left active duty in 1972. You joined the National Guard, right? Tell us about your activity after your active duty.
With the Guard?
With the Guard, yeah.
Well, I went into a National Guard Special Forces group that had one element was up in near Baltimore, and I found out about that. And see, I'd put in over 5 years active duty, and so I'm looking, well, you know, if I can finish out National Guard, I can have a retirement out here. But it was also fun because I was doing SF things, and we would do. Training might take us out on then is the Youghiogheny River up in southwestern Pennsylvania, kind of east of Pittsburgh. We'd spend the weekend doing whitewater rafting as training, getting paid for it as all the other people out there on the river were paying to do it. You know, so it was fun in that sense, and of course I could relate to the people that were in it. After I left that, as just as an aside, by the way, when you got into the first Persian Gulf War, a lot of these guys picked up and went in, and Afghanistan also after 2001. They were pulled into the war. Ours was strictly a training environment at the time. There wasn't that call for us. Right. So I stayed in the National Guard, and I guess that was through 1986. And then when I came into NASA out in California, when I transferred into to NASA out in California, I was not in anything. When I got back here to Marshall Space Flight Center, I got into the Army Reserve, but there we just drilled. It wasn't really a unit affiliation, so I wound up with 24 good years. So you keep abreast of the military very well, and you could do some of those fun things, and yet still lead your civilian life. And I will say that when you hear about weekend warriors, the weekend is a misnomer. We were doing stuff all the time, and you simply didn't go in on a Saturday morning and say, well, what are we going to do this weekend? No, it had to all be set up and ready to go. It was a second, almost a full-time job.
Tell us a little more about your work with NASA. What all did you do with NASA?
I was a contracting officer.
Okay.
Started out at Ames Research Center.
Okay.
Out in excuse me, Mountain View, California. And then it was, I think within the first year that I was married and we were having a child, and it was just too expensive to live out there. So my wife had been born and raised around Memphis. So I'm looking back at, well, there's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville and Memphis. Hell, that's within shouting range of each other, you know, from the West Coast. So I finagled. It took me several months for it to pull it all together, but got a transfer here to Marshall, still as a contracting officer. Here I supported the space shuttle program. From that point on, I got here in, I want to say December of '86. Okay, it was after Challenger.
Right.
And then I supported the space shuttle program all the way through to its retirement. You know, and contracting officers signing the contracts. You know, when Boeing, for example, was building a space vehicle, you know, on a contract with the government, well, somebody has to negotiate the contract, administer it, you know, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's what I did, you know.
Tell us about your family. You and your wife, Rhoda, have been married how long?
We've been married, she's not my first wife. We've been married 22 years now.
Oh,
in fact, I think our anniversary next month, May 3rd, by the way. That's one of the dates you don't forget.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're
very important.
Yeah, 23 years.
Good.
We have.
You met her at NASA, I think.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She worked in the Office of the Inspector General.
I see.
She audited me one time, and I was not one to date in the office place, but okay, went out, and then I always joked that when I married her, I got one less auditor off my back at work, because she couldn't do it. But the rest of the story is I picked up an auditor at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we've been married 20 years. We had two sons. By her previous marriage, they're up 37 this year.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter from a previous marriage. She's 35, I guess. So, and then 3 grandchildren. Wow. They're all kind of scattered around.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I understand you're an avid reader. What
Yes.
all do you read? What's your interest?
Pretty eclectic. I guess my primary interest is politics and military history.
Okay.
I love a good science fiction yarn. Okay, now I like hard science fiction. I want stuff that's based in science.
Right.
Game of Thrones, fantasy. That's not science, but you'll hear part of science. No,
Right.
I want real science fiction. But nonfiction, I like a good mystery novel every now and then.
Yeah.
But most of it is because I'm kind of an armchair military history and political science enthusiast, if you will.
Okay.
So don't get me started. We can go a long time on that. But
Be a longer interview, huh?
yes.
I'm sure there will be a lot of young people who may watch this interview, Emil, and for those who may be considering a career in the military, what advice would you offer those young people?
If they are considering it, if they're looking into it, I would say consider it closely. Look into it closely. The military is not necessarily for everybody, piece, but the military can provide young people with structure and discipline and training. You will do things in the military, at least you certainly stand the possibility of doing things in the military, way before you would get that kind of opportunity anywhere else. I think the one thing that I really kind of would point to in that is I was a 19-year-old second lieutenant, went to Special Forces. Now what these are all these senior guys. There I was a 19-year-old second lieutenant, and I managed my way through. I had been in Vietnam for 8 months, had been leading Special Forces troops in combat, had been awarded the Silver Star before I was old enough to drink in my home state of Maryland, before I was old enough to vote in national elections. So if you're 17 or 16 or 18, ask yourself, what do you think you're going to be doing when you're 20?
Right.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that all provided a really good base for me.
Right.
Okay, so there you are. Look at it closely. Don't blow it off.
Not for everybody, but give it a good look.
Yeah, and you can look across the services.
Yeah.
I say I wanted to go airborne. I wanted to be a paratrooper, but you could get some really strong technical careers in the Air Force, the Navy, I guess in the Army too, for that matter.
Yeah.
So you have this whole spectrum open to you.
Right. Helps pay for your education. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Big
Absolutely.
plus. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now you're wearing your Hall of Heroes medallion. We want to
Yes.
explain that, and you were inducted, as we mentioned earlier, into the Hall of Heroes here in Madison County in 2021. What was that experience like for you, Emil?
Well, it was kind of exhilarating. I really appreciated it because what you all do is really good. Because when you take anyone in any line of work, or any field, military is one, where they put their lives, they go in harm's way as part of public service. They need to be recognized. And I think too often the recognition may be kind of fleeting if it's there at all. And so I thought that was one of the great things. I appreciated that I was being recognized for this. It's not something that I sought, but hey, it fell in. And so I really appreciate what the Military Heritage Commission does, is seeking this out and bringing it to the public light. And I hope I'm not coming across as obsequious, but that's very important. Yeah. And I wish we had more of that, so.
I want to thank you, Emil, for coming up and being with us today and offering to preserve your military experience for the people of this community. And sir, we want to thank you for your service to our country. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. It's all in a day's work, as they say.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, if you'd like more information regarding this interview or any interview in our Military Heritage Series, please contact the Madison County Military Heritage Commission website at mcmhc.us. I'm Tom Kinnemer. Thank you very much for being with us.